Our next question in this series is coming from Marie JB. Dear Tom, I follow your work on YouTube and I also have your book, My Big Toe. While I have not fully applied everything yet, I find myself deeply moved by your teachings. They have brought me comfort and clarity as I navigate grief and seek to better understand consciousness. I would be grateful for your perspective on something close to my heart. Is it possible that my late husband's soul is materializing through my imagination to visit and interact with me? He was an awakened individual who shared wisdom with a small group of seekers, and now he has expressed that he wants to show me he is still with me, even if he isn't physically visible, though he cannot stay long in form. He also explained that this is allowable because both my nervous system and my soul are mature enough to handle his visits. From your understanding, how is this possible? With deep appreciation, Marie.
Well, Marie, of course it's possible. And you know it's possible because you're experiencing it. If it were impossible, you wouldn't be experiencing it. So, yes, it's possible. Now, there's lots of ways to interpret it. Lots of people have their own rule sets and tools that they would use to explain that, and MBT has its own explanation as well, and I will give you that. All of those things you said are true. The reason that he can do that is because you're ready for it, and because you can learn from it. That's an important thing. If you weren't ready, and that would freak you out or upset you or something, or make you think that you were going crazy and losing your mind, if it had some kind of a negative effect, then it wouldn't be happening. So because the larger consciousness system is aware that this is something that would be valuable to you, something that you would treasure rather than fear, then that makes it possible. And what is going on from the MBT perspective is that the larger consciousness system sees that this would be helpful to you. So it animates your husband out of the database. The database is everything about your husband, everything he said and everything he thought but didn't say. It's all his feelings. It's everything. So it's him. After all, we humans are computed. We are information. Well, your past husband, he was information when he was here, and he's still information in that database. He's just no longer making choices under that particular avatar, you see. But the information that defines him is still there. So the larger conscious system kind of uses that form, which is your husband, to send you a data stream that shows you your husband. And now that could be just a feeling. It could be a vision. You could see him, or it could just be words that you can hear him. Could be any number. It could be all of the above. You could see him, hear him, and it's just more like he was physical. All of those things are possible, or any combination of them are possible. It's whatever the system thinks is appropriate for you, not to overwhelm you, but to give you information that you can use that will help your own growth and the growth of other people. So yes, it's entirely possible. Now, when your husband passed away, he, after really not that much time, after just a small amount of time, he needed to get back into the game, because the game is you have to come here or some other virtual reality, but usually people come back here because they're used to the way this reality works, and make more choices. And by those choices, you level up, you grow, you become love. So sitting out of the game and just not having these challenging experiences that we get here isn't a good use of time. So that's why individuals get back in the game right away. But they leave behind everything that was them, all of the information that defined them. And yes, we are defined by information. So that's everything that he was is still there. Now the larger conscious system then can use that form that was the data defining your past husband and interact with you with it in a way to help you and other people. So that's what's going on. Now, if you think, well, that's not really him, that's a fake him. No, it isn't. So what was he when he was here physical? Okay, he was information that was rendered into something that you could see and feel and touch and whatever, interact with your senses because it's a multiplayer game. And he was a part of the larger conscious system, just a subset of the larger conscious system. That was his soul, his spirit. Well, what are you interacting with? You're interacting with all that information that defined him and a part of the larger conscious system, just like it was before. So don't think of him as being a fake him because it's not the real him that was there. No, the real him that was there needs to move on and continue his evolution of the consciousness. Just hanging around in order to, tie up loose ends or answer people's questions or something is not that, it's not so profitable, particularly as the years go by. 100 years from now or 200 years from now, there's not going to be many people knocking on the door or ringing him up. So the way it usually happens is that when an avatar dies, that soul, that piece of consciousness that is a part of the larger conscious system, moves on to another set of experiences so they can keep on learning and growing. But that doesn't mean that you can't interact with that information that was him and that it isn't embodied by a piece of the consciousness system, just like it was then. You see, so that's the way to look at it, and that's the way to understand this sort of thing.
That's a good explanation, Tom, and one that was very much an aha when you explained that we are information. We're first and foremost consciousness. As an avatar, we're computed and we put that consciousness into that avatar. But what we were before was simply the individuated unit of consciousness, part of the larger consciousness system. So you are only exchanging that information avatar to avatar, but that information is all real and it's all accessible. And the interesting part too, you explained often, was that they can answer questions in a probable future, things that stopped at the time the deceased loved one passed can still offer an answer to a question in the future with a
Sure, they have the
probable.
same access to the information that every piece of consciousness has. If you're a piece of consciousness, you have access to a database that's the probable future, and also all the things that could have happened and the probability they would have, and the thread that is our actual past. All of that data is sitting there available to every piece of consciousness. Why is it that when you're sitting at home in your armchair and you start thinking about, oh, I should get up and take a walk. I'll take my dog and we'll walk down to the end of the street and back. And as soon as you get done thinking that, your dog starts running around in circles, excited. Why do you think that happens? Because as soon as you say that, that's part of the database. And your dog can connect to that and get that. And dogs and cats and horses and pigs and everything else that's conscious doesn't have our intellectual capacity or our language capacity. So they tend to use this non-physical connection to the database a whole lot more than we do. They are a lot more intuitive than we are. And they plug into their owner, if we're talking about a dog, they plug into that person. They know when you're unhappy. You don't have to cry. You can just go sit down in your chair and you're unhappy. They'll jump in your lap and try to console you. Not because they understand you had a bad day, but because they can feel your feelings. They're connected to you mind to mind, if you like. Well, we can learn to do that too. But yes, it's all information, and that probable future is available to all pieces of consciousness. So is the past. Now, you have to learn to access it. That's not trivial. You have to learn to access it, but your dog learns to access it just because that's his main tool for understanding the world. They get a lot of information intuitively, and just a little bit, intellectually, or things they process. But sure, they process things just like we do, but their capacity for the processing is much smaller than us. And because they don't have the language, they have their own language, their barks and yips and tail wags and everything else is part of their language. But that's kind of back at the grunts and gestures form of language, which still can be rich and informative, but it's not the same as the spoken language that we have. So anyway, yes, of course, you can get into the future probable database and all the rest of them. And it's just there for whomever. And you can talk to this person who's been dead for 20 years and say, well, what do you think about the upcoming election, George? And they can give you their opinion on it, even though that election occurred 20 years after they died. Mm-hmm. And that will indeed be George's opinion, the opinion that George would have had he been alive. He would tell you it, and it will be in his voice. It'll be in, his prejudices will still be there. Everything that was George is still going to be there, and he can tell you that. But that's because it's his consciousness working through the information that define George. So it's George in every way, other than the fact that this George is not still in this virtual reality we call the physical universe making choices.
Right. Well, Tom, I think that softens the belief that the information in the database is a cold concept. You've brought that to light, that is the information that was there that can be brought back to life, accessed, and the individuated unit of consciousness moves on to another avatar, another experience, because this is a continuing evolutionary process.
It's all in the perspective, you see. When you talk to that avatar that's here in the flesh, so to speak, it's an avatar in this so-called physical universe. Well, you're exchanging information between your individuated unit of consciousness and his individuated unit of consciousness. That's who's talking to each other. The body's just eye candy, So you're really having a conversation between two consciousnesses, and each consciousness is defined by information. The sum total of all the choices you have ever made is who you are now. And the sum total of all those choices is there. It's in the database. So who you are, the data that defines you, is available. All right, so now you're in this physical, and you're an avatar, and you're talking to another avatar that is your beloved son or parent or husband or something. And then the MBT model says when you die, you get reborn later and do something else. You don't just hang around waiting for your family to come join you. That doesn't really make any sense. It sounds nice. It's warm and fuzzy. Oh, yeah, we'll all be together forever. But you look at it rationally, and it's no way to run a simulation. It's no way to evolve the quality of your consciousness. It just doesn't work. It's not effective. It's not efficient. It doesn't really make any sense. But then, I'm just talking to the larger consciousness that's just pretending to be my loved one. It isn't any warmer or colder than the original. It's still exactly the same. You're talking to a piece of consciousness that is defined by every choice that avatar ever made here, which is exactly what you were talking to when they were physical. So it's not like one's cold and one's warm. They're both the same. It's just a different context of understanding a bigger picture of how things actually work, rather than the kind of simplified way that we think that we'd like to have things work.
Thank you for clarifying that. The one thing I'd like to point out is when you said there's no meeting up of the family, but that is something that you can do, right? As far
Oh,
as that multiple information that was the family or whichever loved ones you want to connect with, that can happen.
oh, sure, that happens in the same context as it happens to this lady who's talking to her deceased husband.
Mm.
Yes, all that can happen. It's all information. That's all it was in the first place. So you can revisit that information, and yes, that's all possible. What I was saying is that the the idea that her husband and her husband's parents and her children and her children's children, and we can keep going back to where there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people at this gathering, isn't what happens. Everybody just doesn't hang out together forever. That's non-functional.
I
So
think
that's
what,
what I was referring to.
of
But sure, you can
course, sure.
connect with all the things past and even in the potential future, but it's just potential. It's just probable future. It doesn't have to happen that
I
way.
think it's probably comforting for the newly deceased person to know that they can meet up for one last time as a comforting that
Yeah,
is a um,
yeah,
especially if it's a difficult transition or if that's something that was
yeah,
expected or needed, that could be comforting to that person.
yeah.
And for a
Yeah,
short time, that would happen.
but it doesn't happen. It doesn't have to be for one last time. You can interact with
Yeah,
your
that's
deceased
right.
partner every day for all the rest of your life if you want to, even every day, all day long if you want to. It's not just once, but typically the person who's left behind has some anxiety about, is their deceased one doing okay?
Right.
Are they all right, like in the afterlife sort of thing that they've learned, from their own dogma and their whatever religion or whatever spiritual group they're a part of. So they have some anxiety about that. And just to say, I'm fine, everything's good, no problems here, go on with your life, then that takes a bit of a load off, that people are concerned. And that's why that happens so often. That happens to a lot of people. Most people don't talk about it, but
Right.
that is not a rare thing at all.
There was one instance where a fairly advanced out of body spiritual person spoke with you about conversing every day with his mother and was
Mm-hmm.
convinced that that really is her and didn't quite get your concept of that is its information. It was so real and so convincing. How would you explain that to someone who has connected with a loved one? And I think there's another lady, a doctor, who connects with her son who passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that's a special connection. But how would you explain that situation to those people who might have these kinds of interactions?
Well, I just finished doing that with this lady who had an interaction with her past husband, and the explanation is exactly the same. But I would add to that, well, of course it's real. It's perfectly real, and every detail real, just as physical seeming as when they were here. You see, you hear, you can touch, you can, hold hands. You can do that at that level. This particular person, had gone out of body thousands of times, was very familiar with that. So he could engage all of his senses. He could smell, taste, feel, see, hear. And when you engage all of your senses, well, then it's just like it being physical. Exactly. It's going to be like that. And yes, it's going to be just like mom because that is mom. That's what your mom is. She's a collection of information that defines mom, and she's a piece of consciousness that's chatting with you for a reason that will help you learn and help you grow. So there is a piece of consciousness. There is that information that defines your mom, and it is in all five senses. So why wouldn't it be just as real as it was when it's physical? It is. It's basically the same thing as it was when it was physical. When it was physical, you were talking your piece of consciousness, that their piece of consciousness, through this filter of information that defined all of the choices that your mom ever made in her life. It made her what she was, and that information that defined all the choices you ever made that make you what you are. And that's what you were doing then. So there really isn't any real difference between when it was, quote, physical, unquote, and when it's an out of body, quote, unquote. There really isn't any significant difference. There's small differences, but the differences are not important. They're not significant, really.
Yeah.
So yes, very convincing. Same thing. Yeah, it was mom. Mom has a certain scent, and I smelled that. It's kind of lavender and something else that she tended to have that. And there it was. So everything was there in the physical. So I'm just in some other physical place with her. And well, it seems like that.
Yeah.
It seems like we're in a physical place with each other when we're here interacting with other avatars. Seems like we're in a physical place with each other. And so it does after they pass. Seems like a physical. That's the nature of our reality. And one is not warm and the other one cold. They're both basically the same thing. They're each warm. They're each loving. They're each very helpful to people. It's just that one of them is logically effective and works and allows people to continue evolving and whatever, rather than having them stop hanging out, waiting, for somebody to talk to them. That's not a good design. So one of them's more functional than the other, but as far as your experience, the experiences can be very much the same. Now, if you're not as skilled as this person was, who was good at out-of-body experiences, then maybe you'll only get the sight part, or maybe only the hearing part, or maybe only the scent part, or maybe only the feeling of that person, or just the voice, perhaps. So if you're not that talented, then maybe you'll just get pieces of it.
But these
If you are
things
that
can be
talented,
learned.
you get the whole thing. Yeah, the skills
These
can be
can be
learned.
learned, can be developed, and you can add those things. These people who we're talking about are skilled and maybe naturally gifted, but these things, as consciousness, we all can develop. And I know you teach that.
Sure.
Thank you, Tom. Would you like to see a better world? Get a better perspective. Balance your intellect with intuition and explore your true nature with the Exploring Consciousness and Everything Paranormal program with Thomas Campbell. In this program, you will have the benefit of Tom's vast experience and learn to access point consciousness, communicate with the larger consciousness system, remote view, use your natural ability to heal with intent, and explore reality in the out-of-body state. His famous binaural beats are included. Details are in the description below. Thank you.